Apparently there was a Grand Prix on Sunday, but as far as I could tell, it was a bunch of guys who couldn't figure out where the track was, competing to see who was the biggest narc. Welcome to Race Weekend Update. My name is Stacey Hewen, and these are the top stories from the Austrian Grand Prix. After the Grand Prix ended, Aston Martin launched a protest looking for more deleted laps because apparently more than 100 deleted laps in the race wasn't enough for them. After the dust settled, 7% of all laps were deleted. Thanks, Aston Narkin. Esteban Ocon took 30 seconds of penalties for track limits, applied retroactively after the race had already ended, but even more embarrassingly, he still managed to classify ahead of Bottas and Piastri, and neither of them had any penalties. Lewis Hamilton took a lot of flack for all of his complaining on the radio, but afterwards he explained that he was asked to report on all of the track limits violations that he saw, and that he didn't like it. So essentially, he complained that he had to complain. Carlos Sainz complained that Checo was intimidating him, which means that today we learned Sainz is intimidated by a guy who failed 4 times in a row to make it to Q3 in what is unquestionably the fastest car on the grid. Ferrari was looking much more competitive, as was McLaren. Well, okay, not McLaren, just Lando Norris, because McLaren could only manage to get one upgrade package ready in time for Austria. You could tell that Piastri had some feelings about this, because in the pre-race press conference, he mentioned that the team was doing a great job of getting one upgrade package ready for the race. Despite Red Bull's lack of upgrades, Max won everything this weekend, from quali to the sprint to the actual race. But there was some good news for everyone who's rooting against Max. His streak of 248 consecutive laps led was finally ended. So what you're saying is, there's a chance. The rest of the pack is slowly closing the gap to Red Bull, which is giving a lot of fans hope, and I hate to do this, but I just don't see it. When Mercedes was dominating, they said the hardest part was managing the gap to the rest of the pack to make sure they didn't win by too big a margin, otherwise they would likely see rules changes come in to nerf them. And that's exactly what I think Red Bull is doing. If you take a look at their minimal upgrades this season, it's pretty obvious that they're planning to just coast on essentially this package for the rest of the season while they focus on next season's car. So they're going to be way ahead in 2024. Well, Max will be way ahead in 2024, and Checo will still be fighting his way through the midfield because he can't seem to make it to Q3 no matter how fast the car is. Speaking of people who underperform in fast cars, Lance Stroll had a great Friday and Saturday, qualifying for the Grand Prix ahead of his teammate Fernando Alonso, and also finishing ahead of Alonso in the sprint. I know a lot of people are calling for Lance to lose his seat, but this is exactly the team composition that will get Alonso his 3rd Drivers' Championship if they make a car that's fast enough to compete for it. Fernando definitely doesn't want a repeat of 2007, where he's got a teammate who's capable of competing for the championship and ends up taking enough points away from him so that neither of them end up getting it. He needs somebody who is clearly worse than him in that second seat, so there can be no question as to who is the lead driver. And that's why he and I love Lance. While it was fun watching the sprint with the changing track conditions, it was hard to see the point of it when it wasn't affected by the quali session on Friday, nor did it affect the Grand Prix in any way. Liberty Media has essentially made the teams run an extra half event on sprint weekends because apparently a 24 race calendar wasn't enough for them. When asked for comment, Liberty responded, "The sprint races are the greatest advancement in labor relations since the Cat of Nine Tails." Then they released the hounds. And now over to the Canadian positivity guy for the Canadian summary of the Grand Prix.
Well, you've heard the British guys enough, so why don't you listen to somebody else for a change?
Red Bull just won their 10th race in a row, which puts them just one away from the all-time record of 11 currently held by McLaren. It's looking like Red Bull is about to set some Gretzky-tier records that may never be broken because, hopefully, in the future, there are better regulations in place to prevent a team from running away with a championship like this. And that's all I got. There wasn't much to report on this race, and if I'm being honest, it was Canada Day yesterday, and I got shittered, so there isn't much left in me, because I left so much of myself and your mom last night during the fireworks. And now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Now over to the poll of the week. This week I asked, who will see more Q3 appearances this season? Sergio Perez, Nico Hülkenberg, or Alex Albon? The craziest thing about this poll is it's actually close right now. Checo and Hulk both have the same number of Q3 appearances, while Albon is only one behind. Fucking embarrassing. Nico Hülkenberg's car died early in the race, which saved him the pain of having to slowly fall down through the pack because Haas can't figure out how to make a car that's decent on its tires. As it turns out, that Ferrari power unit was just protecting his feelings. And now for everybody who stuck around to the end, we've got the spicy joke of the week. Max could now theoretically win the Drivers' Championship by Singapore, leaving a whopping 7 races after the WDC has already been won, the longest vinegar strokes period in F1 history. The previous record is 6 from Schumi in 2002, the season of nutted but they still suckin'.